Hello everyone, and before you get started in today's scheduled content, I just want to remind you that 94% of my viewers aren't subscribed to the channel. So if you aren't subscribed, go ahead and go down there and subscribe just for a brief moment before you get started with today's episode. That'd be greatly appreciated. Now back to your scheduled content. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode on the Sports Stories podcast. I'm your host, AJ McSwain. Now for today's episode, I'm going to be going over my week 4 predictions for the NFL season. Now, it's already been a pretty fast season so far, but some moments, to take in from week 3, and can't wait to start off week 4. So without further ado, let's get right into the predictions. Now, with the first game tomorrow, which is Thursday, we have the Dolphins at the Bengals. Now, the Dolphins coming off of a surprising win over the Buffalo Bills, even though they had a butt punt, where the punt hit the Dolphins player's butt and then ended up going out the back of the end zone for a safety, making the score 19-21 in Miami's favor. However, the Bills weren't able to capitalize on the safety, and they weren't able to score, which meant that the Dolphins actually got the dub, and they've stayed undefeated. And I mean, the Dolphins look like a good team here. Offensively, they just look like they meshed so well. Tua's definitely gotten better as a quarterback. Defensive side of the ball is still is lacking a little bit, but they did play really well against a really high-powered Bills offense, and they were able to do their thing. But as for this one, I mean, the Bengals, their offense looked pretty good, but then again, it was against the Jets. I wanted the Jets to win, but the Bills obviously won. I think they were the favorites in that one. And I mean, I feel like, no disrespect towards the Jets, but I do feel that the Jets are a pretty easy opponent to face off for the Bengals. They have a lot of weak spots on the defensive side of the ball. Sauce Gardner did really great for the Jets, but I'll expand further on that once it gets to the Jets matchup. But the Bengals, they played really great offensively. T. Higgins had a couple great catches. Jamar Chase may need to just pick up the production a little bit, but still he did really good in the Jets game. Defensively, they did okay. I wouldn't say that they played the Jets offense too well, particularly well, but I think they did pretty good. But yeah, it's just the Jets, so I'm not sure how many points I can really give them for beating the Jets. But as for this matchup, I'm going to have to take the Dolphins by 7 here. I think the Dolphins are just pretty easily the more developed team going up against the Bengals team that seems like they're really struggling earlier on in the season. Now, this could be, the Bengals coming off of a win, maybe, starts to wake them up a little bit. But, I mean, they played well against the Jets again. And I'm not really sure how much I can take away from that. And the Dolphins have already beaten the Bills, which are a Super Bowl favorite team. The Dolphins just seem like more of the complete team, the team that has a little bit more success so far earlier on in the season. So, as for this one, again, I'm going to have to give the Dolphins by 7. Now, next up, starting off the Sunday matchups. First, I have the Vikings at the Saints. Now, the Vikings coming off of a close one against the Lions, which was a definite heartbreaker for me, but I'll expand on that later when I get to the Lions matchup. But the Vikings, they did their thing, okay? They did struggle pretty early. The Lions to get that 14-point lead earlier on in the first half. And Justin Jefferson was actually struggling against Jeff Okudah. I believe Jefferson had, 3 catches for 14 yards in total. Don't quote me on that, but I want to say that just off the top of my head, if I can remember correctly, that's what I remember. But Adam Thielen definitely did his thing. He showed why he was one of the top wide receivers before Justin Jefferson came onto the team. He was open Amani Oruwariye was having a really tough time really guarding Adam Thielen, and he was just able to get open. KJ Osborne had 2 clutch catches near the end of the game, 2 20-plus yard catches, one to get the Vikings into field goal range, and then another one to score the game-winning touchdown. Kirk Cousins did okay. I mean, he did Kirk Cousins level. Kirk, he did good on that last drive. I mean, he was targeting really good. His pacing was really good. Earlier on in the game, he was having some issues, but I think he was able to really get it done near the end of the game, to help the team win. The running game definitely will have an effect in this game, since Dalvin Cook was injured in the Lions game, and they believe that he should be able to play, but I expect that his play will be limited, because I believe he has to play with a brace on, and obviously I think the Vikings don't really want to injure him too bad, but I don't know if they're going to play him in this game or not. We'll have to see, but Dalvin Cook did get injured, so that did sideline him for about the last quarter, so for about the fourth quarter. And then Madison came in. He got a couple first downs pretty early on to his reps in the fourth quarter. And then defensively, they did surprisingly not too good. I mean, the Lions were able to get to a pretty early lead against them, and Zadarius Smith did get injured during the game, and I'm not sure if he is going to be in this game against the Saints, but he did come back in the game against the Lions, so I believe that he should be fine in the game against the Saints. And then, Danielle Hunter had a couple rushes. He had a couple tackles for loss. Same with Eric Hendricks. But they really started to kick it in during the fourth quarter. And then obviously the game-sealing interception, which I feel was more on Jared Goff than the defense actually being good. So, but you can still give it to them on the stat sheet. And then on the Saints side of the ball, I believe they came off a loss against the Packers. The Panthers, sorry. And they were having a really tough time really trying to get around and trying to seal off this Panthers offense and defense. It just overall was not looking good for them. I believe the Panthers got a pick six pretty early on in the game, and that kind of led the Panthers to a pretty good start. Michael Thomas, I believe, did exit the game for a little while. He is going to be questionable for this game against the Vikings, but I expect him to do pretty good. I expect him to play, but still it is up in the air since it is a game time decision so far from what I've heard. And then, Jameis Winston, just, it looks like that back is still bothering him. I'm not sure if it's just the back or if he, just is a bad quarterback, but we'll have to see. Alvin Kamara, again, not looking too good. He did exit the game, I believe, or did he even play in this game? I don't even remember. But he just didn't. He hasn't been looking good so far. And Chris Olave hasn't really been getting that many targets. Mainly Jarvis Landry, but the Panthers defense was pretty locked down on them. And then Saints defensively had a tough time really stopping the Panthers offense pretty early on, and wasn't really able to do much. And that kind of led to the Panthers winning. Now as for this game, I do have the Vikings by 2 here. I think the rushing attack has a big hit due to the loss of Dalvin Cook. And then the Saints just didn't look good against a pretty bad Panthers offense. And so I think the Vikings should do really well against the Saints. Now next up, I have the Seahawks at the Lions. Now the Seahawks coming off of a loss, close one against the Falcons. And that one was a really good game. It looked really close. Atlanta was really able to score late in that game, which definitely helped them. or definitely help the Falcons. They get the upper hand in that one. The Seahawks offense hasn't been playing well since really week 1. Rashad Penny's been okay, but he hasn't been the best. Let's just put it that way. Same with DK. I have him on my fantasy team, and he hasn't been performing like he used to. Then again, he does have a different quarterback passing to him, which isn't as good as Russell Wilson. But with Russell Wilson's production in Denver, I basically think that he has turned into Geno Smith type of level quarterback there. But overall, the Seahawks just don't look like a team that's really all together and all put together. Their defense is a little shaky, and they just weren't doing their thing against the Falcons. I'd still say it was a really good matchup. Both teams did really well, but that last touchdown there near the end of the game, with about 40 seconds left, for the Falcons definitely did change it for the Seahawks, and they just weren't able to do much there. Overall, the stats were okay, but the Seahawks defense just kind of allowed that last touchdown there at the end and gave it up there. And then as for the Lions, their offense did great at the beginning. Obviously, DeAndre Swift was playing on a pretty bad ankle, and so that limited him for most of the game, but he still did his thing. Jamal Williams did his thing as well. He was going off. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a pretty good run pretty good, span of catches in the first half, but he did end up getting injured kind of later into the game, and that definitely limited his production, and they are kind of questionable on if he will play against the Seahawks, but I think he will play, unless they do want to rest him for these last 2 weeks. They will be resting DeAndre Swift for the last 2 weeks, up until the bye week. So they're going to be benching him for this game and then next week's game against the Patriots. So he's not going to be playing in that one. So the main 2 roles are going to be going over to Jamal Williams and Craig Reynolds, which I am kind of wary of because Williams is okay, but he hasn't really necessarily been well in open space. He's able to get touchdowns, in the red zone, 1 or 2 yards, but having him as the preliminary running back for first, second, and third down, kind of on the fence about. They could probably put Craig Reynolds in there because he is a little bit quicker, but still, both running backs aren't, I'm not as confident in as Swift, but can't wait to see what they're going to do with that duo back there. And then Josh Reynolds had a pretty good game. TJ Hawkinson, overall, his production pretty early on in the season hasn't been that much. He's dropped a few passes last week, especially, or against the Commanders, I should say. And then just overall, he hasn't really looked the same. And there are rumors that they are looking to ship TJ Hawkinson somewhere. And hopefully it is for a good price, because I don't want what happened to Matthew Stafford to happen to TJ Hawkinson. So we'll have to see there. I'm sure he'll probably pick up production in this game. And Jared Goff. Jared Goff is like, anytime I give Jared Goff praise during a game, he just decides to do bad. Like, he was doing so good. He was doing surprisingly good against the Vikings in that first half, right? And then they go out there. It's tied 14-14 at halftime. The Lions come back and Jared Goff is trash, okay? He is such a bad quarterback, okay? Even on that last drive with 40 seconds left, okay? I get it's a tense situation. You're not really getting anything, you got 7 seconds left. You're at the 42-yard line. You can't kick a field goal because you're up 4. You need a touchdown, so you go over. You go deep, and not a completion. Okay, right? Because first down you have spike, so second down you throw it incompletion. Now, okay, it is third down. He rolls out to his left and he gets pressure, right? He's getting pressure, so he rolls out to his left. He chucks it up into double coverage to Amon-Ra St. Brown, but it's not even close to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that's where the game-sealing interception happens, right? But, okay, he could have just easily thrown it out of bounds. He was out of the tackle box, he's near the sideline. He possibly could have gotten over to Amon-Ra St. Brown, but that was a little bit of a tight fit. Or he could have just thrown it out of bounds. Stop the clock. Okay, you got one last play. For fourth down. But no, instead he wants to chuck it up while he's being hit into double coverage. The ball is nowhere near where Amon-Ra St. Brown is. I mean, his last two passes were just nowhere near where the receiver was, and it ended up sealing the game. And they had one more play left. He could have just thrown it out of bounds, and still had that last play, and maybe he could have done something. Line up all three wide receivers, bring out Shark, Reynolds, maybe St. Brown as a lower end. So if he does catch it on the ground, he has enough speed to kind of maneuver and get in. And but DJ Shark and Josh Reynolds are both really tall wide receivers that can try and go up and get it, And no, that didn't happen. Got the pick. And then the defensive side of the ball, they were doing pretty good. Surprise of the week, okay, was Jeff Okudah. Now I've bagged on Jeff Okudah probably as much as I've bagged on Jared Goff because, I expect more out of Jeff Okudah, okay? He was the third overall pick, in his rookie year. He didn't do too well, and then he proceeded to get injured, and then second season in the league last year under a new defensive coordinator, did not look great, and then, had an Achilles injury, which sidelined him for the rest of the season, and that was only in week 3. And this season, he looks definitely better, okay? I don't want to give him too much praise now because I'm not really sure if it's going to carry over, but Jeff Okudah did really good against Justin Jefferson, only limiting him to 3 catches for 9 yards, I want to say. So but Justin Jefferson had probably like 4. I have to recheck the stats because I'm not sure, but I want to say Jeff Okudah only allowed 9 yards by Justin Jefferson. He was pretty locked down. He was locking him down, pretty easily, if I say so myself. Amani-O was just terrible. I don't know what. I think Jeff Okudah and Amani-O must have switched playing. Okay, their bodies must have switched playing because, what was that? He was holding Adam Thielen for the most of the game. He was holding him. Let me see here. I just got those stats pulled up. Yeah, so Justin Jefferson had 3 receptions for 14 yards, and I believe Jeff Okudah only allowed 2 receptions for 9 yards. Still pretty good. Overall, defense did their thing. Now, whatchamacallit? I don't know. I lost total train of thought. But yeah, Amani-O was just holding Adam Thielen every play. I didn't know. He's an elite corner. I believe he's an elite corner, and he just did not know how to attack Adam Thielen, and Adam Thielen was showing that. Okay, he was going off. And the rest of the secondary wasn't doing too well, especially after Tracy Walker did get injured. Unfortunately, he did rupture his Achilles, so he's going to be out for the rest of the season. So I do wish him the best in his recovery process, and I hope he can come back next season, do his thing. But I do wish him well on that recovery, because that is a pretty big injury to come back from. So he is going to be sidelined for the rest of the season, and the rest of our secondary really hasn't done well without him. He's a captain on the defense, and it kind of showed there in the Vikings game after he went out. Just the back half of the secondary was just it was miscommunication after miscommunication, especially on that last play for the touchdown for the Vikings. I mean, it just seemed like a miscommunication on why he was wide open. Corner went down on a flat. Safety and middle linebacker or outside linebacker both went inside, and leaving KJ Osborne wide open. So there was that. And, I mean, the linebackers did okay. Alex Anzalone got a sack, I believe. And Malcolm Rodriguez did pretty good, especially against one of the bigger named running backs in the league in Dalvin Cook. But overall, the Lions didn't do well against the Vikings. Just in that last half, I feel like it was very manageable. But, with the Amani Oruwariye holds, kind of was putting Vikings in a great place. So I'm sure they're probably going to be working on defensive discipline and working on, getting less flags and less pass interference calls. But as for this game, I got the Lions here. I think they're gonna bounce back. Okay, you played a really good Vikings team. You had the lead, but you blew it. Okay, now you're going back home. You're facing the Seahawks, who haven't really done that well. But one thing they do need to prove to me is, do the Lions have to score at least 30 points in order to win? Okay, like they scored 30 plus against the Eagles. They couldn't win, but the Eagles scored 30 plus. Then they beat the Commanders, but they had to score 30 plus. The Commanders only scored about late in in the larger section of the 20s. And then the Lions only got 24 points against the Vikings, and the Vikings were able to get 28. And so do the Lions need to have 30 points in order to either get it within really close, or do they have to win in order to score 30? So we'll have to see what they do there. But as for this one, just give me the Lions here. I think they're definitely the better team over the Seahawks. Now, in this game, next I have the Jets at the Steelers. Now, the Jets coming off of a pretty bad loss to the Bengals, but overall, nobody really played that well, I would say. It does look like they might have Zach Wilson playing in this one again, or in this game. So he is coming back. So I don't think Joe Flacco's going to be starting. And the defense did okay. Mainly the key point for the Jets was Ahmad Sauce Gardner. I think he did great. He's breaking up passes on Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and overall was just doing his thing. And he's pretty locked down. He's everything that I thought he would be coming out of the draft. I think he's a great prospect, and he's really showing it out on the field. And Joe Flacco had 285 yards, 2 interceptions, and 0 touchdowns. He went 28 for 52, and the rushing attack didn't do much. Conklin, the tight end for the Jets, had 84 receiving yards, as well as Garrett Wilson with 60, and Breece Hall with 53 receiving yards. But overall, I mean, the offense didn't really do that well. C.J. Mosley led in tackles with 7, but they were only able to get 2 sacks against a Bengals offensive line that isn't that good, Sheldon Rankins and Quinn Williams. But the Bengals were doing their thing. Joe Burrow had 275 yards and 3 passing touchdowns with 0 interceptions. And Tyler Boyd had 105 yards on 4 receptions. T. Higgins had 93 yards on 5 receptions. So he was doing his thing. But Ahmad Sauce Gardner had, limited Jamar Chase to only 29 yards on 6 receptions. So, the Jets have a really good defensive player. Let's hope they don't, blow it like they did with Jamal Adams. But Ahmad Sauce Gardner is looking like a legit defensive player now. And then the Steelers coming off of a loss to the Browns on Thursday Night Football. It wasn't the best performance. I mean, the Browns really just pummeled them. They couldn't do much on the offense or defensive side of the ball. And it was just kind of a sad performance overall. Couldn't really do much. and the Browns were doing everything to him. Okay, Nick Chubb was going off. Amari Cooper went off. And then the defense did their thing. So Steelers really just need a comeback game here. And I think they can very well do it against the Jets. I think it's going to be hard. I don't think it's going to be, easy. I don't think it's going to come off easy to them. But I think the Jets could very well get the win here. Or not the Jets, sorry. But the Steelers, I think they can really get the win here. So give me the Steelers by 1. I think they're a really good team. I think they just need to show it in a bounce-back game. So give me the Steelers here. Next up, I have the Bears at the Giants. Now, the Bears coming off of a win against the Texans, where it was kind of back and forth, and I expected that one to be close. Overall, they did okay. I feel like both teams in that game didn't really do too well, but the Bears were able to kind of get that win out in a slugfest. And then as for the Giants, they're coming off of a loss against the Cowboys, where they didn't do too well. Okay, the Giants went into that game undefeated, 2-0, playing against a Cooper Rush, and that Cowboys offense was just kind of banged up. But Zeke and Pollard, they connected. Okay, now I believe Pollard did do a little bit better than Zeke, and I can kind of slowly see the takeover happening with Pollard possibly being number one option at that running back room, and then Zeke being backup. It's just looking that way so far. So, and I mean the Cowboys defense, they basically had the Giants number. I mean, Daniel Jones really wasn't doing much. Saquon, he was trying his best to carry the team, as I can say. It just did not look good on either side of the ball for the Giants. So as for this one, though, give me the Giants by 2. I think they're definitely a better team than the Bears, and that Bears defensive line just hasn't shown that they can play against really elite talent at that running back position. And Saquon Barkley looks really good so far. And overall, I feel like the defense is probably the weakest spot for the Bears, and I think the Giants can exploit that. So give me the Giants by 2. Now, next up, I have the Titans at the Colts. Now, both teams coming off of a pretty big wins against AFC West opponents. Now, Titans beating the Raiders by 2. And the Titans overall were pretty, they were beating the Raiders pretty handedly. Now, they did start to allow a comeback, but luckily they were able to kind of cut off the comeback there for the Raiders. Derrick Henry looked like he may be back. I'm not sure. But the Titans overall looked pretty good in that game against the Raiders. But the Raiders just haven't really started that good, but I'll go over it later on in the video. And then the Colts coming off of a pretty big and close win against the Chiefs, winning by 3, 20-17. And I mean, they were doing their thing. They were really limited the Chiefs' offense, and really limited that connection between Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. And that's been a big connection for the team. So they haven't really been able to do much against them, and it's really showing there. But as for this game, again, like I said in my record predictions video, I thought it would be up to these two teams to see who gets first, but I mean, the Jaguars are doing amazing. But I feel like this is still a very important in-division matchup. So give me the Titans by 4. I think overall they're a little bit of a better team. I know it's a little bit of an upset since the Colts are coming off of a win against a way better opponent in the Chiefs, but I feel like the Titans are a little bit fired up after this win, and I think they can continue to carry that momentum on over to this next week here against the Colts and really attack that defensive line that hasn't really been doing that good, and possibly get a bigger role to Traylon Burks. So as for this one, again, give me the Titans by 4. Now next up, I have the Chargers at the Texans. Now the Chargers coming off of a very surprising loss to the Jaguars, losing 38-10. I did not expect that. I did say the Chargers by 1, mainly just due to the Justin Herbert injury. That could limit the Chargers. I was like, the Chargers still good though. Clearly, Justin Herbert is a big part of why that team succeeds, and they just weren't able to utilize him at his full power, again, because of the rib cartilage. He still did play. He's a trooper for that. Keenan Allen didn't play, but just overall, the team wasn't really doing that good. They just weren't able to really get anything going against the Jaguars, which is really surprising because the Jaguars are I thought they're a mediocre team, but with this team, with the win, I don't know. But the Chargers, again, I'll expand further into that once I get to the Jaguars. But, overall, just the Chargers weren't able to really do much. Justin Herbert still threw the ball 45 times. He went 25 for 45 with 297 yards and a touchdown to an interception. But rushing-wise, they really couldn't get much. Sony Michel was their leading rusher with only 22 yards on 5 carries. They didn't really run that much. Now, on the Chargers receiving side of the ball, Jordan Palmer did his thing, 99 yards for 6 receptions. And then Guyton had 2 receptions for 64 yards. But it just did not look good. The Chargers weren't able to force any sack. I believe Joey Bosa did have a limited amount of time in this game. He did look like a little banged up. He is, and I believe he's not expected to play in this week's game, again, against the Texans. So I'm not sure. It kind of depends here. And then as for the Texans, again, they lost to the Bears there by 3, and they kind of had a comeback, and they were able to tie the game 20-20 really late. But their defense really couldn't do much to stop the Bears' offense from getting into field goal range near the end there. And, the Bears kind of kicking through that field goal. So overall, both defenses from these teams did really bad last week against not too good of competition. But as for this one, give me the Chargers by 3. Justin Herbert is still a little bit banged up. Don't think they're going to be, allowing him to pass it that much. But it is against the Texans, and I think the rushing attack could do really well with Austin Eckler. So as for this one, again, give me the Chargers by 3. Now next up, we have the Browns at the Falcons. Now the Browns, pretty dominant game against the Steelers. Defense was able to do their thing. Offense was able to do their thing. Now, some pretty bad news came out just recently, about a couple days ago for the Browns. Myles Garrett was involved in a 1-car accident. Apparently he did try and swerve on a wet highway road to avoid hitting an animal. Ended up going off to the side of the road and rolling over multiple times. And luckily, both him and the passenger were safe in that car accident. But it does look like he does have a leg strain. So I believe they said a hamstring strain, calf strain, and then also a cut on his hand. So I'm not sure if he is going to be playing. They are pushing him to play, or they are, expecting him to play, not pushing him to play, but they're expecting him to play, and that he's not out on any official reports yet. So it does look like the Browns may still have Myles Garrett in this game. Nick Chubb did really well against the Steelers defense. Jacoby Brissett did good. 205 yards on 21 completions for 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Nick Chubb had 113 yards on 23 carries. Amari Cooper had 101 yards on 7 receptions, and David Njoku really broke out in this game with the Steelers, where he had 9 receptions for 89 yards, and he was really doing his thing. The Browns were able to get 1 sack from Phillips, and that was about it. Not much really was happening there. Just the defensive side of the ball is probably the main thing I am worried for the Browns, since they weren't able to really force any big turnovers, besides the 2 fumbles, one from Najee Harris and then one from Warren. But overall, I mean, it was a little interesting. But the Browns defense is probably the weaker spot and my main point of concern going into this game against the Falcons. Now, again, the Falcons did pretty good against the Seahawks, especially late there in the game. Marcus Mariota was able to lead a game-winning drive to score a touchdown with 40 seconds left, and the defense did their thing to stop the Seahawks from scoring. And, I mean, overall, the Falcons did really good in that game. But as for this one, gave me the Browns by 1. Now, the only reason by 1 is because I feel like it'll still be pretty close. The Falcons are a pretty good team. But I think the Falcons are a pretty good team, and they could probably get some things done against a Browns defense that is kind of struggling in the secondary, at least. I think it's going to be an interesting game. I feel like the Falcons have a pretty good defensive line to counteract the Browns rushing game for Nick Chubb. And I think it's going to be a really good game, but give me the Browns here by 1. Now, next up, I have the Commanders at the Cowboys. Now, the Commanders coming off of a pretty bad loss against a good Eagles team. I do have Carson Wentz on one of my fantasy teams, and he had negative points at one point in the game and just did not look good whatsoever for the Commanders. Now, on the Cowboys side of the ball, they did come off a really good win against the Giants. They had a really commanding lead throughout the game, and they were really able to do their thing against them. And the Giants really didn't have an answer for them. Now, as for this one, Cowboys have surprised us, okay? This new Cooper Rush regime beating the Bengals, beating the Giants. Maybe the Cowboys do have a chance of at least some success with Cooper Rush. Not much, but a little bit of success. Now, the Cowboys are expecting Dak to come back soon. I guess his recovery has been faster than they expected. But, as for this one, I feel like the Commanders just need a comeback game, okay? They need something to reset the tone there, okay? They won week 1 against the Jaguars. They lost against the Lions. They lost against the Cowboys. The Eagles. So they need a really good in-division game to give them a lead, or not at least a lead, but a shoe-in for that division title. And I feel like this is the game for the Commanders. So give me the Commanders by 6. I think they can definitely do their thing. They just need a wake-up game. And Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, they've been doing their thing the past 2 weeks, and I think they just need something. Okay, they need something to rally on, and maybe this in-division champion or an in-division play against a weaker opponent compared to the Eagles will definitely help them excel in this game. Now, next up, I have the Jaguars at the Eagles. Now, the Jaguars, okay? Surprisingly, are the Jaguars really that team, okay? And I feel bad for the one guy clowned on CBS Sports, man. He was the only man that had the Jaguars going to a wild card and winning the AFC South. And I want to send an apology to that man, because he was clearly right. I don't know how he knew. He must have been a time traveler, because nobody in their right mind before the season would have been like, yep, Jaguars are them. But I mean, a win against the Chargers is pretty big, okay? Chargers pretty big. They had a couple good wins. They had a loss against the Commanders, but they bounced back really well in the past 2 weeks. And they're just doing their thing. Now, they are playing against the Eagles this week, and the Eagles have been really good, okay? Coming off of a win against the Lions, coming off of a win, or not a win against the Lions. I mean, I was trying to go over their season, but last week they're coming off of a pretty dominating win against the Commanders. And Sorry. And then also a pretty big win against the Vikings and a pretty big win against the Lions. So overall, the Eagles are great. They're undefeated. The Jaguars only have one loss, and it looks like the Jaguars are really going for blood here. Okay. I had that one Chargers game I had in the favor, but I had the Jaguars by 1. Okay. Now in this one, I got the Eagles by 1. Okay. I think the Eagles can still get it done. I think they're definitely a more complete and healthier team than the Chargers were last week, and maybe that contributed to how the Jaguars were able to do well in the game. But we'll still have to see. But I think the Eagles are still really good. But if the Jaguars are able to come out of this game, the Chargers are definitely in the or not the Chargers, but if the Jaguars are able to beat the Eagles in this game, I think the Jaguars are a team that are, a lot of people are going to be on watch for, because the Jaguars might be that team to make it out the AFC South, which is crazy to say, but they may be that team to come out of the AFC South, and especially if they do beat the Eagles. But I think the Eagles just kind of end the Jaguars' run here. Doug Peterson is playing against his former team, but there have been a lot of changes to that team, so I'm not sure how they're going to be coaching against it. But the Eagles, I think, can very well end that Jaguars run that they have going on. Now coming up, we have the Bills at the Ravens. Now the Bills coming off of a surprising loss to the Miami Dolphins. Sorry. But the Bills, just did not look good. And I think the Dolphins overall just had their number, defensively and offensively, and the Bills just weren't able to do much. Even with the safety that they had really late in the game, they just weren't able to capitalize on it, and they looked like they were having some issues. Sorry about that. Now, as for the Ravens side of the ball, they were doing pretty good. They were playing against the Patriots, and the game started off a little bit slow. But Mac Jones did end up exiting the game, I believe, and or not exiting it, but he was injured, and then he still played the rest of the game. But that's when the Ravens kind of started to separate that lead, and they were able to get the win in New England. Sorry about that. But overall, I think these two teams are really good. They definitely have something to prove. I think the Bills need to prove, maybe, that Dolphins game was just a fluke. And maybe, that was just a one-time occurrence. And I feel like the Ravens need to prove that they can win, especially off of a pretty bad season last year when everybody was injured. And their defense hasn't looked that great. I think they just need to prove that they are still a team that can be contending and be in the talks of being Super Bowl champions. And win here against the Bills would definitely prove that. Both of these teams are really good. I think it's going to be really close. But give me the Ravens by 3 for the upset. I think the Ravens can definitely get that one out on the Bills. I think it's going to be really close. The Ravens had a good game against the Dolphins, where they did end up choking that one a little bit. And the Dolphins really had the Bills' number, so maybe they can somehow change their game plan to really form how the Dolphins were able to stop the Bills and see what they can do. But as for this one, give me the Ravens by 3. A little bit of a hot take, but I think this one will be a great game. Now, next up, I have the Cardinals at the Panthers. Now, the Cardinals coming off of a loss to the Rams. That's kind of classic. I think the Rams are just a good team overall. And then the Panthers coming off of a win against the Saints, where they really showed that their defense can dominate in games. And can they replicate in this one? I'm not sure. But I think the Panthers defense definitely has a big head, I feel like they can get some things done, okay? And as for this one, give me the Panthers by 2. I think their defense is really good, going up against a Cardinals offense that hasn't really been playing that well. And, maybe the Panthers can get it done in a really close game. Now, next up, I have the Broncos at the Raiders. Now, the Broncos coming off of a win against the 49ers, and the Raiders coming off of a loss to the Tennessee Titans. Now, the Broncos just, I mean, they have wins, but they're like bad wins. They're like kind of like sloppy ones. Like, should they have come out with the win on that game? Type of feeling after they win. So so far the Broncos just okay. Russell Wilson just doesn't seem like a good fit there. All the memes about Russell Wilson being a corny quarterback, being a method actor, playing quarterback. I mean, just overall that team just looks off. Like they're winning, but like they're not really winning. It feels like they aren't supposed to win these games. And I mean, if Jimmy Garoppolo didn't step out of the back of the end zone, the 49ers probably would have won. And I mean, the Raiders, man, they're killing me. Okay, I think I had to make a sacrifice in order for the Lions to have a win. The Raiders had to start 0-3. Okay. But the Raiders, they just looked really bad at the beginning of the game. I mean, they were making the Titans look really good. They were making the Titans look like the old Titans. Okay, maybe that is the case. Maybe the Titans have finally woken up. But to compare, the Titans' performance against other teams and then the Raiders just aren't that good. Derek Carr's having a pretty bad season so far. I mean, Matt Collins was able to get it really close there with his couple of big catches and touchdown, but they just weren't able to complete the comeback. I believe they were down 21-10, 24-10, and they were able to make the score 24-22. But they just couldn't get much done. And I sorry, I clear my throat here. But I think the Raiders just are trying to get accustomed to this new kind of system, and maybe this kind of leads to more of the narrative that Patriots, assistants just aren't able to be head coaches in the league, and it's not working out for the Raiders so far. But I definitely think they need a comeback game. I think they need a wake-up game. They're down, they've lost 3 straight. Maybe they can get it done. I think they can get it done against a really big divisional matchup in the Broncos. I think that's definitely what they need, a big wake-up call against a divisional matchup. One that's very winnable for them. I think the Broncos aren't that good. I don't think they're a great team, and I think the Broncos can possibly do something against the Raiders here. So give me the Raiders by 7. I think it's going to be a really close game, but I feel like the Raiders overall are a better team and are capable of beating the Broncos, who haven't really shown that they're a really good team. So give me the Raiders in this one by 7. Now, this next matchup, I have the Patriots at the Packers. And obviously, it feels like Mac Jones is most likely going to be out of this game with his high ankle sprain. And so that leads in for Brian Hoyer to step in as the starting quarterback. Now, the Patriots haven't looked good. They didn't look good. They looked pretty good when Mac Jones was in against the Ravens, but they just weren't able to do much after he was injured and continued to play. And the Packers, they did their thing against the Buccaneers. It was a really close one, really low scoring, but they were able to get it done against the Buccaneers, which was a really tough team. The Buccaneers weren't able to get that 2-point conversion near the end to tie it up and to send it to overtime, so the Packers did great there. As for this game, I feel like the Patriots could possibly get a win here. I know this one's probably my biggest upset of the week. I think the Packers are favored by like 10 points. And, give me the Patriots by 1 here. I think the Patriots, with Brian Hoyer, there's backup quarterbacks have stepped in so far this season, okay? Joe Flacco steps in, the Jets get a win, okay? Obviously not against the Ravens, but against the Browns, okay? Cooper Rush steps in for Dak Prescott, the Cowboys win, okay? Maybe this is the year for the backup quarterbacks, and Brian Hoyer steps in for Mac Jones, and the Patriots are able to win by 1. So give me the Patriots by 1 here. I think it's going to be really close, mainly because the Patriots aren't that good, and they don't have all their starters in, but I feel like the Patriots could pull off a big upset here against the Packers. Okay, next up, I have the Chiefs at the Buccaneers. I think this is going to be a really big game. I think this might be game of the week here. right there next to the Bills versus Ravens. Now the Chiefs coming off of a surprising loss to the Colts, where Patrick Mahomes completed 20 passes for 262 yards for a touchdown and 1 interception. The rushing attack just wasn't able to do their thing against the Colts rushing defense. Juju Smith-Schuster had 89 yards on 5 receptions, and Travis Kelce only had 58 yards on 4 receptions, which is kind of low for Travis Kelce. Yeah, I think the Colts did a good job of kind of, again, separating that duo there. And, I mean, overall, I mean, the Chiefs were still able to get 5 sacks, so they were definitely going after the quarterback, but couldn't do much. Sky Moore had a fumble. Isaiah Pacheco had a fumble. And, I mean, it didn't look good, okay? Did not look good. They kind of lost, and they had 3 fumbles. They were able to get 2 back, but they did lose 1. And, I mean, the Chiefs defense wasn't able to have any turnovers, for them. I mean, Matt Ryan fumbled twice. He lost 1. Granson and Taylor both fumbled, but, they were able to get those back. They weren't able to stop Jonathan Taylor. He had 71 yards on 21 carries, and Michael Pittman had 72 yards on 8 receptions. So, and then Pierce had 61 yards on 3 receptions. So, I mean, the Chiefs' defense just didn't look good against the Colts, which is really surprising. I feel like the Colts were kind of a bag team. You know, I think they weren't really that good. So I thought the Chiefs had it in the bag, but clearly they did not. The defense did not perform well, and the Colts were able to really separate them. Now, as for the Buccaneers, I believe Mike Evans is coming back into this game, which is a big loss for Tom Brady. I think they definitely needed them against the Packers, where Tom Brady only completed 31 passes for 251 yards and a touchdown. They weren't really able to get much off the ground, as Leonard Fournette only had 35 rushing yards. Russell Gage was their leading receiver with 87 yards on 12 receptions, and Cameron Brate had 52 yards on 5 receptions. However, Tampa Bay did fumble 4 times, and they lost 2 and got 2 back. They were only able to get to Aaron Rodgers once with 1 sack, and just weren't able to do much. They forced an interception for Aaron Rodgers. The Buccaneers did really good on that rushing attack, only limiting to 67 total rushing yards. But, I mean, the Packers would definitely light them up on the receiving game. The Buccaneers really couldn't do much. Dobbs, 73 yards, Cobb, 57. And they were only able to get 1 really big turnover, fumble-wise. So they're only really able to get 2 turnovers on the defense. And I think this one's going to be a great game. 2 big powerhouse teams. But give me the Chiefs in this one. I think the Chiefs overall, I think they have more to prove coming off of a loss to a pretty bad team. I think they definitely have more to prove than the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers, I mean, they didn't look too well against the Packers. I mean, offensively, they looked not that good. Defensively, they did good. I mean, they only limited the Packers to only 14 points, but offensively, they just didn't look like they were on the same page, mainly because of the loss of Mike Evans, but he's coming back for this game, so I feel like this one will really be a toss-up, but give me the Chiefs here. Now, next up, I have the Rams at the 49ers. Now, the Rams coming off of a win against the Cardinals, winning 20-12. And Matthew Stafford completed 18 passes for 239 yards. And Cam Akers was really able to get off the ground there with 61 yards on 12 carries. Skronik had 66 yards on 4 receptions. Higbee had 61 yards on 4 receptions. The Cardinals did pretty well, limiting Cooper Kupp to only 44 yards on 4 receptions. And then, I mean, looking at, the defense, they didn't really do all that much. They had 2 sacks on them, on Kyler Murray, but I mean, that was really about it. I mean, the Rams were able to limit the Arizona rushing attack to only 70 total yards, but that's about it. I mean, they were getting cooked in the receiving game, but the Rams overall, I feel like their defense has kind of slowed down a little bit, but the offense has definitely carried them to some wins. And then as for the 49ers, I mean, just a bad performance against the Broncos. Jimmy G coming in as his first start, obviously walks out of the back of the end zone, which is probably one of the biggest storylines of the game. I mean, they only lost by one, losing 11-10. I mean, that one was just an absolute slugfest. Jimmy Garoppolo had 18 completions for 179 yards for a touchdown and 1 interception. Jeff Wilson was able to get off the ground. He had 75 rushing yards on 12 carries, and Deebo Samuel had 73 yards on 5 receptions. But looking at the defense, they were able to get 4 sacks on him. Okay, I think it was just some mental errors that happened that led to the 49ers ending up losing that game. But as for this one, I feel like the Rams are going to continue their win streak here to 2 straight wins, I believe. Let me see. Because they didn't win week 1. So, yeah. So 2, or no, they didn't. Hold on, let me see. Actually, I'm not sure why I'm so confused. But, yeah. So, they're going to win. They won week 2. They won week 3. So, actually, give me the win streak of 3 straight games. I think they're going to do great against the 49ers. I have the Rams winning by 4. Okay, and that will be the end of the episode here. I hope everybody enjoyed. Thank you for listening all the way through, or watching all the way through if you're at this point. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you go down there, leave a comment, like, and subscribe. If you are listening on a podcast platform, make sure you give the podcast 5 stars and hit that follow button if you can. That'd be greatly appreciated. And then, share this episode with anybody that you think would be interested in seeing my predictions. And then also make sure that you are following the Sports Stories Instagram at sport_stories_podcast so you can vote on the games and have a say in what your guys' record is. My record currently is 18-29-1, so I'm doing pretty bad so far. But you guys are doing amazing with a 24-23-1 record. So y'all got a winning record right now, and you guys are doing your thing. So make sure you keep voting there, and have a say in what your guys' total record will be. But overall, I do want to thank you guys for listening all the way through, and have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.